it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. Baby, it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. He's drilling through the Spiritus Sanctus tonight, through the dark hip falls, screaming, "Oh, you mammals, kill me and kill me and kill me." If I check the handle, you'll die in your dreams. If I jerk the handle, jerk the handle, you'll thrill me and thrill me and thrill me. Baby, it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. time of an exile from the jails of another, where soundings are taken, brought to his eyes. I have walked the way for you, down to splintering bone ashes, with your voice shining seared in his fractures and scars. There are no voices here, there are only confessions, keeping him hidden, weighed out of his name. We have entered deserted. He has gazed from my windows, as if all that replaced us could still end in me. For the first time unwoken, I am returned. For the first time unwoken, I am returned. He arrives from a place with a face of fast sun, arrives from a space his refuge overrun. She will fold him away in his badly changed hand, fold him away far behind where I am. For the first time forgetting, I am returned. Her mind moved on the silence, I am returned, as if all that replaced us ended again, as if all that replaced us ends.
You're lying on your bed, making shadows on the wall. It's almost too hot to move outside your window. People are driving home from work for the weekend, but you're waiting for the phone to ring. You're gonna tell her exactly what you think. You practice getting your mouth around the words that explain the way you feel. You've been scared to show your real self in case she doesn't like what she sees. You've been a prostitute to humility. She's invaded your life, and you've got to live apart in order to survive. Starved of affection, but now you've been trapped by tenderness and been beaten into submission. It's now way past the hour she usually phones. Decided not to tell her your little joke. Where could she have got to? Why is she torturing you? You roll on your side and run your fingers through your hair. You're scared of losing her and facing yourself. A red sky night may be a shepherd's delight, but you're cutting chunks from your heart and rubbing the meat into your eyes. Oh, she can't leave you now. You've given up all your friends. You're relying on her for your independence. She can't leave you.
in the twilight hour, waiting for the light to fade, for it no longer to be light, waiting for the dark, waiting.
it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. Baby, it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. He's drilling through the spiritual sanctus tonight. Through the dark he falls, screaming, "Oh, you mountains, kill me and kill me and kill me." If I check the handle, you'll die in your dreams. If I check the handle, check the handle, you'll thrill me and thrill me and thrill me. Baby, it's slow. When lights go low, there's no help, no. sign of an exile from the jails of another, where soundings are taken, brought to his eyes. I have walked the way for you, down to splintering bone ashes, with your voice shining seared in his fractures and scars. There are no voices here, there are only confessions, keeping him hidden, weighed out of his name. We have entered deserted. He has gazed from my windows, as if all that replaced us could still end in me. For the first time unwoken, I am returned. For the first time unwoken, I am returned. He arrives from a place with the face of fast sun, arrives from a space his refuge overrun. She will fold him away in his badly changed hand, fold him away far behind where I am. For the first time forgetting, I am returned. Her mind moved on the silence. I am returned, as if all that replaced us ends it again, as if all that replaced us ends.
Scott Walker and Sleepwalker's Woman, and before that the Walker Brothers and a Scott Engel composition, The Electrician. There are 6 years between the release of those two tracks. The first, The Electrician, came from the Walker Brothers album Night Flights, which was released in 1978, and the track that we've just heard, Sleepwalker's Woman, is from his most recent solo album, Climate of Hunter, which has just been released. Scott's with me in the studio tonight, and the first thing I'd like to ask you, having listened to those two tracks, and it's the second time I've played them back to back in this program tonight. Before you got here, I played those two tracks in a slightly different setting a little earlier. There's 6 years between the release dates. Is there 6 years between the period of composition of those two pieces?
Yes, 6 years of working towards it, the second composition.
At the same time, they sound to me almost as they're coming very much from the same place.
No, it's very, very different. One is a political song, and the other is very different still.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I won't elaborate on the second, but the first one is having to do with, if I can remember correctly, 6 years is a long time. The Americans sending in these people to train torturers in South America. The Electrician was what it was all about. I imagine these lovers in a conversation. And the other one is totally different from that. If you listen to the words of the Electrician, it really explains itself after I started.
Where were you when you wrote the first one, The Electrician?
I was in a flat in Fulham, above a very noisy restaurant. But late at night, no one could hear me, so I could work like that.
It's been a long time, of course, since you lived in America. You came to England, I know, in the mid-60s with the Walker Brothers, intended to stay not just in England but in Europe. You've lived in various other European countries, but you stayed for most of the time in England. Why is that?
Oh, for various reasons. I mean, when I came here in the 60s, the draft board was chasing me. And when you have a success, as the Walker Brothers had, you tend to stay on and get used to the place. I wanted to get to Europe anyway, and it just all came at the right time, a combination of things that brought me here.
And what's kept you here, though?
I don't know. I've been back to America, if I could compound the entire time, in 20 years. I'm coming up to 20 years now here. The entire time back in America thrown together would be about 3 months. Many, many things have kept me here. I guess old habits die hard at the end. You know.
You mentioned that the Walker Brothers, in their time, were very successful. Was it the result of that success that you were able, these last 6 years, to take the time that you obviously needed to make this record? In other words, what have you been living on between those two records that we've just heard?
Well, not a lot. But that's part of this business. The 60s, it was a rough time for everybody, you know, and not a lot of groups got paid. So they, generally speaking, if they went on, made their money up in the 70s. But we never really made our money back. And, friends, and up until about last summer, management, anything keeps you going, publishers that pay you when they should, and that sort of thing. Somehow you get through like everybody else does.
Have you ever been in a position when you would have had what you would consider a lot of money?
No, I've never had a lot of money at a time. I mean, I'm trying to think of a large amount of money in one bundle. No, I had about 15,000 at one time, which is not a large amount of money in these terms, £1,000. And that's the most I've had at one time.
Did it enable you at the time to do anything that you'd not been able to do before?
Yes, it enabled me to get through some of the 70s, which was very difficult for me because nobody wanted to sign me as a writer. They just wanted to sign me as a singer. And this money helped me to go on holidays when I needed it enough and escape what I was having to do enough and trying to hang in there until I could get a better deal. Yeah.
But it wasn't just a question, I think, of getting the right deal, was it? Because you've been working on songs during this 6-year period. I believe that you've been into the studio on various occasions to try and record them, but they've not always turned out to your satisfaction. What basically was the problem?
That's not true. I've not been to the studio at all in the 6 years. And I've had several tries at writing songs for this album, but basically it was a question in the end of atmosphere. I would get settled and something would happen. I would have noisy neighbors, or I would have terrible conditions and would be thrown out of flats because the man wanted to sell the place for various reasons. All the time in the 6 years I was rather working towards what I call a silence, where this could come to me rather than me force it. So I'm having this kind of experience. It was very important that it flowed to me rather than me trying to push it on. And so I was looking for the right atmosphere, and time and perception seemed to arrive at once in everything. I don't know why. So when I got a publisher's check last summer, I felt, well, I should really get away from the city, go down, take the bits and pieces I had, and try to bluff myself into throwing this together. And then I did it in 2 months, and I came up and I recorded it in 2 months.
Did you spend a lot of time during those 6 years actually on your own?
Yes, quite a lot of time, and most of the time when I was writing it, I spent the 2 months on my own, totally, of course. Yeah.
And did you find that you wrote most at night, or was it during the daytime?
I found that it's kind of a kaleidoscopic process. I don't know. I don't like to talk too much about the process because I don't really understand it. When it got to this album, it got away from me, the process, and I'm a little superstitious, so I don't talk about this thing too much.
Yeah, but I'm not asking you to explain how you wrote it. Just sort of
the circumstances.
About the circumstances.
Yeah. Well, it just would come to me from mid-afternoon on. Yes, many times I wrote at night too, and then of course I would take many nights off. I was just waiting. It's a process of waiting if you want this kind of thing.
What else do you have to wait for, though, apart from the feeling that you're ready yourself to write? I mean, when you go in then to a studio to record, to what extent are you dependent upon the other musicians that you then work with being able to understand in whatever way, be it intuitively or whatever, what it is that you've written, which you've spent a long time on your own conceiving?
Well, it comes from it comes from a couple of things. I'm from the old school of recording, when everything had to be done. In the Philips days, we had to do 4 tracks in a 3-hour session. And so I have that, and also I'm now into the new school of recording, so I'm in between the two somewhere. So, but basically what I'm trying to say is that everything is in my head before I go in. It's just a matter of getting it out of the musicians and them taking it a little further once I'm in there. And it's very much I work very much on a one-to-one basis. There's no one allowed in the studio but the musician and myself. And in this case, I had a co-producer who, because I was studio rusty after 6 years, helped me technologically in this.
To what extent was the completion of the album a release, a feeling that it marked the end of a certain stage of your life, or was that not the case?
Oh, it marked the end of a big stage, because it was a very big struggle. Uh, but I think now I have a lot more confidence once again. You see, once you wait all that time, everything is draining away from you. Your confidence of writing, singing, whatever it is draining away, and you know what you're doing. I mean, I knew that Virgin, who had signed me, they'd signed me for 6 years. They might as well wait forever, because they were prepared to. I had to motivate myself. That was the hardest thing to do. But in the end, you see, where I've arrived now, I could probably go in another year and a half or year and do another album fairly quickly, to my satisfaction, because I feel once again in some kind of a groove.
Let's listen to another track from the record. I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. If you want to say anything about it, we can do that afterwards. This is from the album Climate of Hunters, Scott Walker and Dealer.
The windows are ringing, shaking nights for angels, rattling throats up and down on the beat, cooling the hearts, cooling the plasma, keeping ice junkies packed hard on a scene. The other side of the prowler, the dead still search the living. At least there we did not fail. Coming to in the overcast, tracks are still flowing. At least there he does not wait. Psalms of your hand sung into the lateness, move a circuit on the white, and he can't feel a thing. Gone always alone, to all you are never. He climbs into your mouth when the windows break. Shaking dead men for angels, hissing brains boiling up, pressed to the bone. Uncoils the wire whole night long, bumping out through the iron night. Sweetheart numbers, sweetheart, bumping out through the iron on a wire of nights. Sweetheart numbers, sweetheart, bumping out through the iron on a wire of nights. Songs of your hand sung into the lateness, move a circuit on the white, and he can't feel a thing. Gone always alone, into all you are never. He climbs into your mouth when the windows rain. When the windows
Scott Walker from the album Climate of Hunter. That's called Dealer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the songs for the record were written in a creative rush that lasted about 2 months. I heard you at least say this on the radio earlier in the week. If that's true, to what extent then is it an album that's descriptive just of that period of time, or does it reflect the way you were feeling during the years before finally making the record?
Yes, it reflects the way I was feeling and the way to get to it, basically. So.
What else was necessary then to get to that point? I'm not now talking about writing songs necessarily. I'm talking about things that you go through on a day-to-day basis. I mean, what did your daily routine, for instance, look like before you finally got back to writing and recording?
Oh, I suppose much like the mass unemployed in Britain, sort of. I don't know. I would just. I was fortunate enough to be able to have many times enough time to read enough, to see enough films, to see enough of the things I enjoy. And throw the Protestant work ethic away, you know, it was that kind of thing.
Perhaps we can talk in a minute about some of the things that you might have seen or read a little more specifically. But before that, I mean, was it a conscious decision on your part, after the Walker Brothers had gotten back together, had made a couple of albums, to then stop and do something else, to have time for yourself again?
No, what had happened, are you talking about the 70s Walker Brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah. This company we were with, GTO, was dissolving, and I was the producer on those albums, and I said, and on the Walker Brothers albums too. I was co-producer in the early days, but this was a different thing. It was all in my lap. So I said to the other guys, this is going to be the last album, so everybody just get as self-indulgent as you want. Just do what you want to do. And that's how that came about. And so after that, from this album, Virgin signed me.
You say that you said to the others, become as self-indulgent as you wish to be. I'm sure that's not to be taken entirely seriously. On the other hand, the album was split very much between the three of you. The first 4 songs on the first side were yours. The last one on the first and the second was credited to Gary Leeds, and the other 4 came from John Walker. Was that, again, a decision to separate the three of you very much? Because it does sound like that. It's like 3 different people just sharing the same album.
Well, John's on all of my tracks. I'm not on his, because that's the way he heard it. No, that wasn't a conscious decision to separate any. I mean, only because when I was writing the Night Flights, I had him in mind above me all the time. So it might have been a subconscious decision.
What's he doing now? Because I read recently that he's signed to Rough Trade, and there was an album due for him, I think, some time ago that's never appeared.
No, he made a single with his wife. They're doing a duo. And he asked me to help him on this. And he has a very staid idea about what should happen, as all the people in the business do. And there was not a lot I could do. I don't know if they ever released it. I'm not aware of it. But it wasn't an LP, it was just a single.
Does that mean that you don't have much contact to one another anymore?
Oh yeah, I do. But when I get into conversations with him about that, he hedges it slightly. I don't know what happened to that record. Oh yeah, I talk to them 2 or 3 times a month at least. So we're very friendly.
What's he doing now?
Well, he's just waiting for this single to come out. You know.
Unemployed as you were, in other words.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. He does a lot of he has a lot of publishing connections, so maybe he's working in publishing in some way. And Gary's working in advertising, doing jingles and things like that.
Let's go back again for a minute to the point where that album was made, completed. You said that GTO was in the process of dissolving at the time, and that was the main reason why you then were not able to record afterwards. But I'm sure if you'd really wanted at that stage to get back into recording more quickly than you finally did, it would have been possible. I can only assume, therefore, that there must have been some other reason for not getting back and recording earlier than that.
Well, the reason was that I had gone through just a spate of making a lot of bad records, and I had to pull myself together to make to try to get back to a state that I was in when I was making my good records. Not that I could ever achieve that same state, because you're younger then, but I had to make, at least, if this was going to be my last record, a final good record anyway. So for me it was good.
There are various ways, of course, of stopping. I mean, one of the things that stops people sometimes doing one thing is that something else happens in which they become much more interested. I mean, the obvious example of that would be John Lennon, who stopped recording. He was criticized by everybody, almost everybody, for doing so, but had his own reasons, personal reasons, family reasons for not recording. Was there a main reason, though, in your case, for wanting to do something else, or did you simply stop doing what you were doing? I mean, the reason that I'm keeping on this point is that the fact that I find the new record interesting has a lot to do with the fact that you've not been doing anything as far as the public is concerned for a long time, because one of the problems sometimes of talking to people about music is if they're so involved with the music business and they put out an album on a regular basis, their whole life revolves around the music. And it's very hard then to get away from that. And I find the new record, as I say, for that reason, interesting. What must be in back of it?
Well, that is a problem when you're recording a lot of material, or when you consider yourself to be prolific. You do have to live with a constant. You're in a constant situation where, oh hey, what's the next interview? What's the next this and that? And you really have to take a breather. I'm not saying everyone should take a 6-year breather, but you have to take. You know, to get away from that, to see any kind of light at all. I don't know, for me it was a question of almost, without sounding too pompous or pretentious, sinning. I had committed to myself so many sins. I was trying to make up for it in the struggle to get back was harder because of that. You know, I'm talking about sins as far as work is concerned. Well, of course, I committed many others, but I'm talking about work here. You know, but also living is paramount to me. I didn't spend all the time just thinking of this record either. You know, then you would become insane in another way. You know.
We'll listen to another track from the record. As I say, it was conceived over a longer period, but finally written down during a much briefer period of time. It conveys to me an atmosphere that's present on all of the tracks. I'm sure that you, obviously, being that much closer to it, can see lots of differences track to track, but I'm sure most people listening to it for the first time would get the impression that it's a statement in itself. I'm not talking now about the statement that's being made by the lyrics. I'm talking about the actual presence of the album when you listen to it as an entirety for the first time. And perhaps after we've heard this track, we could talk a little bit about that. This is track 3 from the album Climate of Hunter.
From the host of latecomers, a miracle enters the streets, shining with rain. He is shaking to wash the murder away. The shadow of the sun made the sun a shadow. It's never night when I die. That desert clouds under and so Lord lightens. Sleepers wait there with wounds in their sides. In the strength of the tribe, you sing like a stranger, and your failure fulfills your most secret defeat. After me, I'm no man's son, run out and recognize a life of its own lays down the horizon, the distance rigged in his eyes. Rock of cast off, bury me, hide my soul, sink us free. Rock of cast off, bury me, hide my soul, pray us free.
Track 3 from Climate of Hunter. The Electrician, which we heard earlier, you said and explained was a political song, whereas the song that we heard after it, Sleepwalker's Woman, was not. Without once again asking you to explain songs, are the songs on the new record, though, personal to you, or are they related in any way to specific events that have taken place whilst you've been living in England, whilst you've not been recording?
Well, all at once, both things. And though they're personal, I think that they are accessible, or should be accessible to everyone who would have the patience to try to listen, and they should at some level be resonating. I don't know. Everyone will listen to it in a different way, I imagine, but it should work. I was working towards that, so that it should work all the way around. I'm not, in other words, I'm not a cut-up writer. It's not that sort of process.
Are you a logical writer then, in that sense, that you start at the beginning and work your way through a song, or do you find that specific ideas occur to you that you jot down and then work from one idea either forwards or backwards?
No, I mean, that can happen. It can work in bits, but generally speaking, with this album, it didn't seem to work like that. It just came to me as it should have done at that time, as I thought it would do.
Obviously, for anybody listening to it, they're going to react in their own way, as you say. They're going to respond to it in an individual way. But at the same time, you say you think that it'll be something that they can understand. I wonder, though, to what extent it's necessary to find some kind of a key to get into the meaning of the songs. I mean meaning in the broadest sense of the word, to actually understand, to appreciate what you were feeling at the time. Or do you think that that's not necessary? As long as somebody individually gets something out of it for themselves, it makes no difference whether they actually get down to that level of understanding, appreciating what you, for yourself, were trying to say at the time?
I don't think it's important that they identify with me at all. And I think it's just important that somebody who has not even heard of me in any way picks up the album and takes it home and listens and looks at the lyrics and is some way attracted to it.
Do you react differently now to the songs, now that the album is out, now that you've had time to distance yourself from them?
Well, it's not easy to listen to yet. This takes a period of waiting because, you know, you've been through the whole process and it's very, very concentrated. So it's still not easy for me to sit and listen to, but I imagine as time goes by, yeah.
It's a serious record, I think. We're talking about it fairly seriously as well. I wonder if that means that it only portrays one side or a side of your character. Did you find that there is another side of your character that you find very difficult to put down into words, for instance?
The side of everyone's character who is working on, who is a writer of any kind, they're working in a very authentic way when they're doing this. What they do away from this is totally different. It's a cliche, but we're as many people as the people we know. I just went my way through several short novellas, but it will come to me. You know, when you ask somebody what they've read or heard recently, they can never think of it. And I'm in that position right now.
We still have time anyway. I mean, maybe some other things will occur to you a little bit later on. You mentioned, though, that you read earlier more novels than perhaps you read now, although you've just said you've read various novellas, and that you've read more journals recently. Do you find that you now read a lot more about the people whose novels you perhaps once read? I mean, are you interested in reading biographies, for instance?
No, not at all. I did read a biography on Joyce, but it has something to do with what I do. I think he's wonderful, but...
Which biography was that? The one from Richard Ellman?
Yeah. And I read one by Ronald Hyman on Nietzsche, and I think he did one recently on Kafka. sort of breezed through that one. I didn't think it was very good. Trying to remember. I can't remember now. But that's at least in the last year you've got, well, 6 things, because Main Currents was 3 books, so...
But having mentioned Rondell Hyman's biography of Kafka, presumably you read that because you'd read the novels of Kafka.
Very early on, yeah.
Were you not interested at that time, for instance, to know about the person behind those books?
There wasn't a lot about in biography at that time. And also Kafka is a very, very interesting writer. In his own country, he's considered to be a black comic writer. You know, we take him very seriously in England. And I've always found him very funny. I don't think people should take him that seriously. He is very funny and serious all at once. So,
depending, of course, upon when you read various books, they can have an enormous influence upon your life. Obviously, when you're younger, they tend to influence you much more. It becomes much more difficult, I think, as you get older, to go through any kind of experience that comes through an outside medium, be it a book, be it a film, or be it a record, or be it whatever, that can have that strong an influence upon you as you get older. You therefore start looking around for other ways of getting that kind of a rush. It tends to come, I think, more from people, which is probably the good thing about getting older, that you grow away from taking your experiences from things that other people have done and start to get them more out of your own life. Have you found that to be the case for yourself, that it's not made you worry about getting old or older?
Oh, that's been the best part, because you really do have to find it for yourself. In the end, you realize that everyone else is groping around too. When you're younger, you think, well, somebody's got the answer. Well, of course, Camus has the answer. Well, of course, you know. But they don't, any more than you do. And that's the greatness about getting older.
This is track 6.
Say it got late on that one, that life-giver one, hanging weightless from the wound in a half-light. Taken up, I could hold him when all falls away. Prayed into each other, you stood in the air, and the ceilings are rising and falling. The ceilings are shining and slow, healing tongues from the ice and letting it go. And the ceilings are rising and falling. The ceilings are shining and slow, healing tongues from the ice and letting it go.
We've not got that much time left. If I may, I'd like to ask you a few questions that aren't necessarily going to be related to one another in any way whatsoever. There are just various things that occur to me that I'd like to ask you about. Were you, for instance, living in England during the Falklands War?
Yes.
What effect did that have upon you? Presumably you followed the coverage of that in the British papers and on television, or the lack of coverage of what was happening, or the delay in the coverage of what was happening. What was that like for you being in England at that time?
Oh, it had the effect on me. I don't know whether the press coverage on something like that, it's very difficult to get any kind of positive reaction, especially being so close to the government we have at hand now. I always doubt the press coverage on that. I didn't know what to think, really.
Would you go back to America to live?
Well, I haven't thought about it recently, but there's always a possibility. I never say never, you know. I don't know what would make me do that, but it might come about again.
We're going to be jumping from subject to subject here, but that's the way it is because time is short. Do you have any interest, for instance, in things like astrology, parapsychology, those kind of things? Have you ever shown an interest in that sort of thing?
No. I mean, I know about, I was interested at one point for the sake of dinner conversation, probably in astrology, but not really. No, I think it's interesting that people are exploring those things because people should be, those things should exist to keep us out of closed systems of any kind. And so they're all very healthy, as long as they don't become a closed system in themselves. You know.
Do you therefore not think that the phases of the moon, for instance, has any effect upon people's personalities, as lots of people would like to believe? And I think the emphasis is perhaps on like to believe.
Yes, well, I would agree with that emphasis. I haven't found that it's been so for me, but John believes that's true. My brother John, he thinks this has a big influence, but I don't know.
Would you therefore describe yourself as being more of a realist?
No, I think I have a broader view than that. I'm not into logic in a big way, but I would say I had a broader view than being a realist. No, I don't know what you mean by that exactly, but if you mean what I think it is, as a logician of some kind, this is true. No, I'm not that at all.
Do you find that there's a big gap between the way that you react up in your head and the way that you react down in your heart? It's this old dichotomy that people like to talk about. You can intellectualize far too much, and by doing so you start to kill off the basic feelings that you had before you put them into thoughts, into words.
Yeah, dualism, another dualism, yeah. Oh, no, I think I'm very wary of a dualism and of any kind, mind, body, mind, heart, or any sort of thing like that. And I know what it is and all the problems it brings. And I avoid it as much as I can. You know, sure, sometimes you're going to say you're going to make linguistic associations for the basis of a conversation, but that's about it. Everything works to me.
The album has a very strong atmosphere, as I've said before. I would classify it as being more melancholic than anything else. Is that a reflection of the way you are generally?
I think so. But at the same time, I'm not overtly sentimental. I don't think there's any sentimentality on the album. So I avoid that. This used to be a problem with me in my early days, you know. But I think I am a melancholic, yeah, and it's something to be to live with, yeah.
Melancholic without sentimentality, also without any self-pity?
Yes, absolutely, these days, without any self-pity at all. I have, or even, it's hard to pity somebody else, so you got to get yourself together first, you know, to get low enough for that. I have this sort of situation where I feel that, well, when you're young you can indulge in that, but when it gets later, all these feelings have to go away. You have to get rid of all this stuff and go for a broader angle.
This is track 5.
It's a starving reflection if he dies in the night, listening to the increase. It cuts out your likeness in blood circulation, suspended beneath the release. A low volume force feed, lower than pity, slips across under the heart. And your hostage rewinding from every eclipse rolls in the voltage, runoff rain on his lips. We chew up the blackness to some high sleep, travel past the silence, one to go long again, in the going gone again, full step passages striking less face, outside on the move, a shattered hot pace, greases of vein, sinking the blood back, breaking to where loaded icons wait. Eyesights catch far awake in a cold sanctuary. Pain sonics eternities all through the moons. A first communication tears loose undelivered and swims unassigned in your dimmed latitudes, and the heat from the shore melts down to receive us, bloodlit foreheads howled open, and so nearly blessed as they soften round dark jaws of unfinished strangers, rubbed out on a pause after burning.
Track 5 from Scott Walker's solo album Climate of Hunter. Because you arrived slightly later than I'd expected you to arrive, it's meant that things have worked out somewhat differently. It was originally my intention to try and set your music in a different framework. In other words, to play your music back to back with various other tracks, which to a certain extent I was able to do in the first part of the program. But I think it's been better that we spent the second part talking. On the other hand, it's meant that we've listened just to your music, and to a certain extent, I've been responsible for the way you've been represented during this hour through the questions that I've asked. Do you feel that during the last hour, for instance, what we've talked about has been representation of the way you see yourself, rather than necessarily being representation of the way I might see you through the questions that I've asked?
Oh, I think it's been give and take. And as we see ourselves, it's a very complicated process that's going on all the time. So, sure, it's been clearer than most of the things that I've done. I'll say that.
I mean, I'm not fishing for compliments.
I know.
It interests me because I think that the very fact that you've been doing various interviews over the last few days, whereas you've not been doing them for a long period of time, it's interesting going through that experience, I think, because at the time, I'm sure there are various things in your head that you think, that's what I should be talking about, that's probably what people should be asking me about. And often it happens that you can go through days of doing interviews and nobody asks you about those things that you perhaps expected people to ask you. And I'm not talking about what was it like being with the Walker Brothers, I'm talking about more general things than that.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience these last few days?
Oh, yes, yes. And my biggest exercise is probably dodging the questions rather than trying to answer them, you know.
Okay, I have a final question. I've got other questions that I'd like to ask that we've no time for, which relates specifically to the record. It's the only track, in fact, which I'm going to ask you to talk about. I think it's fair to do so because it's the only one on the album that you weren't responsible for writing. It's the one I'd like to end with tonight, and it's called Blanket Roll Blues. Before we hear it, perhaps you could tell me a little bit about why you recorded this song.
The song has been... it's wonderful. Someone's just fallen asleep in the studio. I can hear him snoring. The song has been in the back of my mind for years and years, and it's it was just finding a time and a way to use it. And I thought, it's such a small song, and I've never been able to sort of put it anywhere, and it seemed like the perfect sort of period at the end of all of this. Really.
And the lyric?
Tennessee Williams lyric. It's the only song he ever wrote, and he'll be sadly missed, I think.
It's a marvellous lyric. It's very, very short. One of the shortest lyrics I know that managed to say in so few words so much. It therefore seems, after so much talk, the right song to end on. Scott Walker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
When I cross the river with a heavy blanket roll, I took nobody with me. I took a few provisions, some for comfort, some for cold, but I took nobody with me, not a soul.
You're listening to BFBS, the British Forces Broadcasting Service here in Germany, where the time is 2 o'clock, time for the latest news from Radio 2. And at the news desk, here's John Marsh.